Tonight on Unsolved Mysteries.
She was beautiful, charming, and she loved horses. But even though Shelly Malone was an expert rider, eyewitnesses claim she died in a freak riding accident. Shelly's family thinks the truth is very, very different. In Indiana, a sudden thunderstorm spells trouble for an unsuspecting motorcyclist. Tragedy seems inevitable until a mysterious lady in black appears from out of nowhere. It was the night Senator Robert Kennedy was assassinated, a crime which many believe is still unsolved. A young photographer named Scott Enyart claims he was taking pictures at the exact moment of the shooting. Now those pictures have inexplicably disappeared. September 1994. A lone gunman lurks in the woods outside Anderson, Missouri. His target, an off-duty highway patrol officer. His apparent objective, vigilante justice. Join me. Perhaps you may be able to help solve a mystery.
I would hope now that the California primary...
June 5th, 1968.
Now that these primaries over...
Senator Robert F. Kennedy addresses hundreds of supporters who've gathered to celebrate his victory in the California state primary.
My thanks to all of you, and now it's on to Chicago, and let's win there. Thank you guys.
Within 20 minutes, the senator's triumph would be swept away in a hail of gunfire. The accused assassin was a young Palestinian national named Sirhan Sirhan. The years since have been marked by heated controversy. Many people question whether Sirhan acted alone, whether a second gunman was involved. The debate has been fueled by the belief that there was no visual record of the precise moment the senator was gunned down. Now that assumption has been challenged.
There's no film of it, there's no videotape of it, there is an audio recording from a radio reporter, and there are my black and white photographs, and that's it.
Scott Enyart says this is a photograph of him taken in the pantry of the Ambassador Hotel. Scott claims that at the instant Senator Kennedy was shot, he was taking pictures. What is most puzzling about Scott Enyart's remarkable story is that no one can find the bulk of his photographs or any of the negatives. Enyart claims he shot 3 rolls of film that night. The authorities, however, maintain that 2 of those rolls never existed. When Senator Kennedy gave his victory speech, 15-year-old Scott Enyart was just a few feet from the stage, shooting photographs for his high school newspaper. These are some of Scott's pictures. He took his first roll of film before Kennedy mounted the podium. Scott says he loaded a second roll just as the senator began to speak.
Well, the senator has just finished his very brief little talk.
As the speech concluded, Scott says he joined those who followed Kennedy from the stage. After leaving the ballroom, Senator Kennedy headed down a corridor which led to the pantry. There he stopped to shake hands with the kitchen workers.
When he stopped, I was about 10, 12 feet behind him. There was an open wedge which had been made by the 2 people on either side of him, so I had a clear view of him. It's at this point that I brought my camera up and started taking pictures.
Suddenly, gunshots rang out.
Now, I was behind Robert F. Kennedy. Sirhan Sirhan was in front of Kennedy, so I did not see Sirhan. All I saw was Kennedy twist and fall. I moved back and jumped up on a steam table. And I took some pictures over where the dog pile on Sirhan was taking place. His hand was sticking out with the gun in it, but I couldn't really see what was taking place there because so many people had crowded in at that point.
Is there a doctor in the house? Everybody, please stay back. Please stay back. We need a doctor here.
A few moments later, Scott Enyart returned to the ballroom where pandemonium had broken out. At that time, Scott says he loaded and clicked off his third roll of film.
I noticed two men in suits. They were looking at me rather strangely, and I moved a few steps, and they moved a few steps. Not knowing who's a terrorist, who's an assassin, and who's the police, I took off.
Wait, hold on. Okay. Oh, watch the camera.
They went through my pockets and took all 3 rolls of the film. They took the camera, of course. And it's at that point I realized these are detectives and I'm with the good guys.
At around 3 a.m., Scott was taken to Rampart Station in downtown Los Angeles.
Scott, Sergeant McCann. Hi. I understand you got some pictures of the shooter, the suspect doing the shooting?
Well, I'm not exactly sure.
Where were you, Scott?
Okay, I was in the embassy room.
Scott was questioned for about 20 minutes. This is an actual recording of the interrogation.
Pictures. So there was a table here about 3.5 feet tall, I'd say. So I got up on it, so I was above everyone. And then the shots started to be fired, and I took pictures and kept taking pictures.
While the shots were being fired?
While the shots were being fired. Maybe a little afterward. I'm not exactly sure. I could tell. I can only tell by the pictures.
Scott Enyart had become a small part of history. 6 months later, Sirhan was sentenced to life in prison for the murder of Robert Kennedy. The court ordered that all files from the case, including Scott's photographs, be sealed for 20 years. Scott waited. By 1988, he was an established photographer. Scott wrote to the LAPD requesting that they return his film. 5 months later, Scott received a letter from the California State Archives which stated that his photographs could not be found. The conclusion was that the pictures had been, quote, destroyed by LAPD in August 1968. Scott immediately filed a lawsuit against the police. This time he waited 8 years.
Top LAPD detectives were assigned to work with our attorneys in preparation for this lawsuit. Naturally, if we could find what Scott was looking for, we thought that that would make the lawsuit go away. And it was just some good detective work and looking in places where people hadn't looked before that found, up in Sacramento, found that booked under a different name was a sheet of negatives that had already been cut and put into plastic sleeves.
A few weeks later, the city attorneys presented Scott with a proof sheet made from those negatives. Scott immediately became suspicious. The proof showed only 1 roll of film. The stock was Ilford ASA 125. Scott claims he shot 3 rolls that were Tri-X ASA 400, manufactured by Kodak.
Basically, what I believe the police did was they took roll number 2, which showed the speech, and they used part of that in this proof sheet, and then they used roll number 3, which was once I returned to the ballroom afterward, where you see the aftermath and some of the victims and things, and they just put them together as a proof sheet and expected that they could pass that off as being all the film that I shot.
That roll is a continuous roll of film, shows pictures before Mr. Kennedy speaks, pictures of Robert F. Kennedy speaking to the audience, and then pictures of the aftermath of the shooting. There are no photographs in the pantry. Our position is that Mr. Enyart did not make it into the pantry and did not take photographs inside the pantry.
Then in 1991, a book came out that contained a number of previously unpublished photographs. This one was taken in the pantry a few moments after Senator Kennedy was gunned down. Scott Enyart swears that he is the young man, standing on a table with camera in hand, just as he told detectives on the night of his interrogation.
I don't know who that person is for sure. We don't believe that that's Scott Enyart. I think it's just a coincidence that he, says that he was standing on a table and there's somebody standing on a table in the picture. We don't think that's him.
Scott Inyart continued to press his case against the LAPD. In January of 1996, the city attorney's office hired a private courier to transport the negatives in question from the archives in Sacramento to Los Angeles. Once there, the courier rented a car to drive from the airport to the downtown courthouse, about 20 miles away. Soon after leaving the airport, the courier was forced to pull into a service station. His right rear tire was flat, apparently slashed by a knife.
What do you want me to do? No, I'm a courier on my way to court. All I need to know...
Sometime during the next 10 minutes, the briefcase containing the negatives was stolen.
I was with my attorneys when we learned this, and we were just absolutely shocked. I mean, we were... For some reason, we weren't surprised, but we were just truly shocked.
I couldn't believe it happened. But if I was a conspiracy theorist, I'd say, see, there's further proof. Now we'll never know.
The Inyart photos, if he captured the actual shooting, would be the only photographic record that we have. If those Inyart frames were on Kennedy as he was falling, it could be the whole case. It could tell us everything we want to know about what happened.
Next, in the aftermath of a violent storm, a young man finds himself in desperate need of a miracle. And later, when an experienced horsewoman dies in a freak riding accident, her family's suspicions lead them to a stunning conclusion. Good fortune can quickly turn bad, swift as thunderclouds can sweep a summer sky. No one knows this better than Robert Davidson. 16 years ago, in June of 1980, Davidson was barreling down I-74 near Acton, Indiana. As a rainstorm whipped up around him, Davidson's luck suddenly changed for the worse.
When you're driving 60, 65 miles an hour on a motorcycle, and when raindrops hit you, it's really pretty stingy. It hurts. And I thought, better pull over and get my rain jacket out of the trunk. I had one foot on the ground when that's the last thing I can remember.
It was a direct hit. More than 200,000 volts of electricity. 38-year-old Robert Davidson should have died right then and there. Yet Davidson is still very much with us today at the age of 54. Some say his survival was just another shift in the winds of fortune, nothing more than a stroke of luck. But others, including Davidson himself, call it a miracle, personally delivered by a messenger of God. Within minutes of the lightning strike, emergency crews were on the scene. From the start, it appeared their efforts would be in vain.
Clinically, he should have been dead. By the color of his skin, when we arrived, there was no blood pressure, no pulse. Basically, he had no chance at all.
Hey, Thelma, I'm gonna need a chopper in here right away. This guy's in bad shape.
According to several witnesses, events at the scene suddenly swerved towards a supernatural. First, every power circuit in the ambulance inexplicably failed.
All right, 10-4.
And the engine shut down, the lights turned off, and it was without power completely. We got dual batteries. One battery would go down, the other one would take over. And there's no way they could have both gone down at the same time.
It was an eerie feeling I mean, you could just, it felt strange. And as they were doing the CPR, you heard this woman coming up yelling, I need to touch him, I need to touch him, just let me touch him.
I must touch him. I must touch him.
Nobody knew her name or where she came from. Later they would refer to her reverently as the Lady in Black.
She just kept again and again and again, you know, I can save his life. And of course, you know, at that point in time, I kind of thought, well, maybe this is just one of the people, so to speak, left over from the 70s, you know. But I said, you know, let her do what she needs to do. You know, what can it hurt?
The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He leadeth me in the name of righteousness for his name's sake.
She was dressed in the late 1800 dress, your basic black dress. Very, very old-fashioned. She had the old-fashioned black shoes that went with it and carried her little black Bible.
Then she raised the Bible to the sky and started speaking in tongue, which was something I didn't understand, but I'm sure somebody out there did. You could just feel all the time that she was saying this, just chills from head to toe. I mean, it was like just this tremendous amount of energy. When she was finished, she looked at me, smiled, and got up and walked away. Probably 5 seconds had passed by, and I turned to look the direction where she had left, and there was nobody to be found.
Accounts from that day couldn't be more contradictory. Some eyewitnesses, including 2 of the paramedics, insist that the mysterious woman was never there.
I don't know why they couldn't see her, really, because it was plain as day to me, it was plain as day to Randy. You know, why couldn't anyone else see her or hear her?
There is no doubt in my mind that she was there.
I believe there was a power that actually shut the vehicle down, a surge which just obliterated the vehicle's power supply and shut it down when this woman walked by.
According to those who saw the Lady in Black, her departure triggered another chain of uncanny events. First, the ambulance came back to life. Then,
I've got a pulse.
It almost burst my eardrums, but it was a welcome to hear that first heartbeat. And I yelled again. I think everybody could have heard me down the interstate because I was so happy that we was getting some vital signs.
Davison had a heartbeat, but his life was still hanging by a thread. The ER physician was not optimistic.
My prognosis was that he would not come out of his coma. And I expected him to remain in permanent coma and ultimately suffer complications and ultimately die.
For nearly 2 months, Robert Davison was more dead than alive. Then one day he simply woke up and resumed his life.
When I came out of the coma, I looked around and I couldn't figure out what I was doing in the hospital because I had no memory of anything happening to me that would put me in the hospital.
When it became apparent that he indeed woke up, and not only woke up, but was talking and walking, I was utterly amazed.
Davidson's astounding recovery has prompted speculation that the woman in black was far more than a simple passerby. Some believe her to be a divine spirit that rose up from Indiana's fervid religious past. Just down the road from where Davison was struck by lightning lies this quiet meadow. It is a site of a 19th century spiritual retreat known as Acton Campground. More than 100 years ago, this spot rang out with fiery sermons, gospel hymns, and the strange music of the faithful speaking in tongues. Most of Acton Campground burned down in 1905, but a few artifacts can still be found at a local museum. There, among the relics of a long-vanished era, is a vintage dress, unmistakably reminiscent of the Lady in Black.
I believe that this woman maybe had been a pastor, a reverend, or a priestess, or whatever in her life prior. And when she passed on, she was brought into, I guess, a guardian angel form.
I know I witnessed a miracle. There's just no other words to say it. It was a miracle.
Many will argue that Robert Davidson's life was saved by quick treatment and a measure of good luck. But others believe just as firmly that the spirits of Acton Campground were awakened and that one of them came to Davidson's rescue.
He leadeth me beside the still waters.
I've always kind of believed in angels, that everybody has a guardian angel, but most people never get to see him or have him really do anything for them. I think my angel was doing her job that day.
Coming up, controversy rocks a wealthy enclave in Virginia after a beautiful young woman dies under mysterious circumstances. But first, Timothy Combs bills himself as a servant of God and a defender of freedom. But the police say he's a dangerous criminal, perhaps capable of murder. September 16, 1994, Anderson, Missouri. A lone hunter cautiously makes his way through the woods, stalking, waiting for just the right moment to strike. But his prey is not what you would expect. The target this night is a Missouri State Highway patrolman, and the hunter is not your everyday outdoorsman. According to the police, his name is Timothy Combs, and he calls himself a free man. They exist on the farthest right fringe of the political spectrum. They believe they are the true Americans, but others call them domestic terrorists. The rallying cries are Waco, Ruby Ridge, and now Justice Township in Montana. The Freemen are a loose-knit brotherhood, bound by what some say is a pathological mistrust of the United States government.
Mr. Thomas, in late November of last year, did a couple from Kansas City call on you at your home or place of business?
Yes, they did.
What was the purpose of that visit?
This is a recreation of a so-called common law court. Most freemen no longer acknowledge the authority of our legal system and see common law courts as a way to circumvent the government.
May I ask you, what was it the sheriff wanted to talk to you about?
Well, he wanted to know if I had a tax ID number, how long had I been working out of my home, and had I paid state sales tax.
State sales tax?
Yes, sir.
He wanted you to pay state sales tax on items that you made in your own home?
That's right.
Mr. Thomas, may I ask...
The common law courts now that are being formed are by citizens of the counties, and they are tired of being jerked around in the state courts, not having their rights protected within these courts. The common law courts are predicated upon free men using their right to determine issues of law.
Robert Jose, a self-styled minister, is asked to be filmed in silhouette due to his religious convictions. This is a photograph of Jose taken in 1995. He is one of the area's leading advocates of the free man movement.
The Freemen, or super patriots or Christian patriots, believe that the Constitution is a divinely inspired document along with the Bill of Rights that gives them preeminent rights in American society. That they do not have to do things like pay income taxes or have driver's licenses and so forth, because that's all part of the laws that were passed after the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. They see these as man-made laws that don't apply to them.
In the case of Robert Jose, that philosophy apparently led him to issue fake legal documents. In 1985, he was convicted of drafting a bogus court order in the case of a parishioner who'd been arrested for a minor traffic offense. For 9 years, Jose laid low on his farm while he contested the conviction. But in June of 1994, the new prosecuting attorney from McDonald County, Missouri, ordered the Highway Patrol to bring Jose in.
Mr. Jose has a history of resisting arrest.
and to avoid an armed confrontation on his property where he was believed to have a large number of weapons, the decision was made to arrest him on a county road where he was by himself.
Jost drove right into a trap. Sergeant Steve Dorsey and Corporal Bob Harper were waiting.
I knew Joe's from several years back, and he had never caused me any problems.
Robert, get out of the van, Robert!
By some accounts, this day would be different.
I walked up the van, him screaming and all. You think you're dealing with someone that had a mental problem. I mean, he's screaming and hollering and just throwing his hands up and saying, "Who are you? Who are you?" And
Robert, if you don't calm down, I'll mace you. Robert, I'm gonna mace you.
Deliver me, Yahweh, deliver me! They're coming! Our Father! Our Father!
I knew if they were going to kill me, they were going to kill me. There wasn't anything I could do except pray to God, and that's what I was doing.
Pardon heaven, hallowed be thy name.
And I knew they had no rightful cause of arrest, and as it turns out, they didn't have any. That's why they had to make up the story about resisting arrest and a concealed weapon after they arrested me, so they had some reason to hold me, see?
Robert Jost was taken to McDonald County Jail, where he remains to this day awaiting trial, unable to raise bail. According to the authorities, his confinement precipitated the disturbing events that followed. 3 months after Jost was captured, one of the arresting officers, Corporal Bob Harper, was home celebrating his 33rd wedding anniversary.
I heard this loud shot, and I ran up the hallway, and Bob was laying next to the cabinet, and he was trying to tell me that the can had exploded, and I explained to him that he had been shot.
Call the sheriff.
The sheriff. Okay, hold on. Hold on.
It was only by a miracle that Bob Harper survived. The bullet pierced his ribcage and missed his heart by just a 1/16 of an inch. The next day, investigators clustered around a grove of trees 245 feet from Harper's kitchen window.
I think it looks like Miles. I don't know much about
It wasn't long before they found what they were looking for.
looks like 7116 maybe.
Bob Harper was not known to have any enemies. And because of his recent involvement in the arrest of Robert Jost, we felt that it was probably connected.
A few days later, officers were dispatched to the Jost farm to speak with Robert Jost's girlfriend. They were confronted by an armed stranger.
Man Rose, a gun.
What do you boys want? This is private land.
We're with the Highway Patrol.
What do you need?
We need to talk to Annie.
He demanded that we stay where we were, and he said that he would go get her. We felt uncomfortable staying there, so we retreated to our patrol cars. And about 10 minutes later, he returned and started shouting at us, and we subsequently had about a 30-minute conversation with him.
Right here with the citizens of the Kingdom of Christ, we got our elders.
The man identified himself as James Wilson. According to the police, he began to spout wild religious rhetoric, unlike anything they had ever heard.
Well, tell us, you say that the state elders are training people to carry out violent acts for violations against the church?
Well, sure. We've got snipers right now being trained by the state elders to help us. You know, it's the law. It says it in the Bible. It's God's law right there in Colossians 1:13. You can read about it for yourself.
How many are in that violent faction?
Well,
And we didn't feel comfortable with what we had heard from him. So the following morning, calls were made to Arkansas, and we received a large amount of information about James Wilson. Found out at that time that his real name was Timothy Combs.
Timothy Combs had served time in prison on various weapons charges. By the time police secured a search warrant for the Jost farm, Combs had vanished. However, investigators did uncover an impressive arsenal: pistols, rifles, and more than 40 sticks of dynamite. That same day in Arkansas, Combs's next-door neighbor gave investigators a bullet that had struck his horse's rear flank.
Can you show me the location of the shooter?
Sure, as my neighbor. He's up this direction.
A man suspected it had been fired by Combs, who often took target practice nearby.
You see the machine shed there and the tree to the right? He's about midway in between, back in that brush line.
According to the authorities, a thorough search of Combs's property turned up the incriminating evidence.
Hey, Tom. Yeah? Like I got something?
Shell casings that reportedly matched the casing found outside of Bob Harper's kitchen window. Police suspect the trail leads not just to Timothy Combs, but to Robert Jose.
We believe that there was collaboration between Jose and Timothy Combs. We believe that the weapon used to shoot Bob Harper was actually an SKS rifle that had been purchased by Robert Jose about 3 weeks prior to his arrest for resisting arrest. He will now not talk about that weapon.
Robert Jose maintains that he had nothing to do with the attack on Bob Harper.
Yeah, they're trying to claim I was involved in a conspiracy to shoot Harper. I had nothing to do with it. Didn't know anything about it until after it happened. Still don't know that he's actually shot. I've never seen any medical evidence, never heard a doctor testify the man was shot. As far as I know, he had another heart attack and had to crack his chest, do emergency open heart on him. I mean, from what I've experienced with these cops here, they'll lie about anything and everything to try to frame somebody and the people that are helping him.
To date, only Timothy Combs has been charged in the shooting of Bob Harper. Combs is now 37 years old. Authorities believe he has gone underground and is probably being harbored by members of a right-wing militia group.
There are people associated with this movement who are threats because they see themselves as warriors, basically, against American society. They see themselves as having a special status that others are trying to, they believe, undercut. And the problem with that is that when this is increasing in small communities in particular, it's a very, very, very scary thing for local officials and others to have this counterforce there that's usually very well armed and is implicitly a threat.
And I gave him a good price.
While we were completing this story, we were saddened to learn that Corporal Bob Harper had died during surgery for a pre-existing heart condition. His colleagues believe there could be no more fitting tribute to his memory than the capture of Timothy Combs. Next, witnesses say veteran rider Shelly Malone was trampled by her own mount. However, expert horsemen say highly unlikely. The Plains, Virginia is thoroughbred country, a small, wealthy community where both people and horses have pedigrees. It's not at all the kind of place you would expect to find an unsolved mystery, much less a mystery fueled by one family's suspicions of foul play. Shelly Malone was 37 years old when she died. On many levels, her case is one of the most emotionally charged we have ever profiled. We have been unable to obtain interviews with the local police or the people who were with Shelly the day she died. Consequently, this story is told almost entirely from the point of view of Shelly's family. Are they overreacting out of grief, hypersensitive to every inconsistency? Or is it possible their suspicions add up to a sinister truth? October 18th, 1992. Paramedics were called to a field in a wooded area outside the Plains. Shelly Malone, an accomplished horsewoman, had been badly injured in a riding accident. As the paramedics struggled to save Shelly, her boyfriend, George Carhart, and two other friends, Erica Stumvall and Carter Wiley, could only stand by helplessly and watch. According to Erica, the only witness to the accident, Shelly's horse had stepped on her and kicked her repeatedly. One blow was apparently powerful enough to rupture her heart. However, Shelly's family has always found Erica's account highly questionable.
I know that that accident is most improbable, if not impossible. In an open field, for a horse she loved and loved her, to step on her squarely on the chest after he had thrown her off, this is impossible.
To Shelly's family, it seemed particularly impossible for such an experienced rider. Shelly had been around horses since she was a young child.
Shelly was born loving horses. When she was 6 or 7, she told me she was going to marry a horse when she grew up. So she never ever lost her interest in horses.
It was horses that brought Shelly to the Plains area in 1988. Located an hour and a half from Washington, D.C., the Plains is home to many of the country's rich and powerful, including U.S. Senator John Warner. Though her own roots were modest, Shelly gained entry to this elite society, thanks largely to a wealthy older benefactor named Cecil Altman. Altman set Shelly up in business and reportedly gave her an allowance of $5,000 a month. Shelly lived in a small house out in the country, a perfect place to stable her 2 horses. In 1990, she started dating George Carhart, who lived in New York and reportedly came down frequently to visit.
Okay, here we go. Here you go. Here you go. Move your chin. There you go.
However, Shelly's mother claims that after 2 years, Shelly was ready to move on.
Okay.
The relationship was strained. She had relayed to my husband and myself that she was bringing this relationship to a close.
On Friday, October 16, 1992, 2 days before she died, Shelly allegedly had an impromptu romantic encounter with a local attorney. Shelly's family believes George Carhart found out about the affair when he came to visit that weekend.
Well, Carter and I are going to go chop some firewood, and we'll have dinner when you guys get back. Okay, great. Okay?
On Sunday afternoon, Shelly had plans to go riding with Erica Stumbaugh. George Carhart and Carter Wiley, Erica's boyfriend, stayed behind at the house. Erica has issued only one official statement on the day's events, a written document she prepared and delivered to the police. You're about to hear selected portions from that statement.
We alternately walked, trotted, and galloped the horses through several fields and trails. We were approximately 100 yards into a new field we had just entered. We were walking the horses side by side to cool them down. Unexpectedly, both horses spooked or started. I was thrown and fell off to the left of my horse. I was not seriously injured. I sighted Shelly about 30 feet away.
Shelly!
The horse stepped on her legs, face, and head, kicking her head as he did so in an apparent attempt to get away. As the horse moved away from her, I immediately ran to her.
Shelly! Shelly!
I checked her pulse and looked in her mouth to see if there were any obstructions. I noticed her left cheek was turning purplish blue, which I assumed was the result of the horse stepping on her face.
I promise. I'll be back as soon as I can, all right?
Fearful of a head injury as a result of seeing the horse kick her in the head, I then concluded that the best thing to do was try to seek medical help.
Erica says she got lost trying to find help. It would be an hour and a half before paramedics reached Shelly. It was George Carhart who later called Shelly's mother in Florida.
When the phone rang, he said, Shelly's had an accident. I expected him to say she slipped and broke an arm or a leg or something. And I said, what kind of an accident? And he said, she's dead.
Shelly's family claims they got another shock at the morgue. To them, Shelly looked like she had been involved in much more than a riding accident.
One of the clerks there showed us a Polaroid of my daughter's face. It was so battered and so swollen, her eyes were black and blue, that I didn't recognize her.
According to Shelly's family, subsequent events made them even more suspicious, despite the fact that the coroner's ruling was accidental death. 2 days after Shelly's funeral, her family claims they had an odd experience at her home. George Carhart was one of those present.
There was a pickup truck backed up to the front porch, and there was some large pieces of my sister's furniture on there, and they were moving stuff out and loading bags up with her clothes and her belongings.
Shelly's mother claims that Carhart made several insensitive comments.
Packing up some of Shelly's stuff.
Why?
Well, I live here too. I just wanted to get rid of everything that was pre-George, okay?
And I countered with, well, I'm pre-George, and I don't understand what you mean. And he said, all of her clothes will go to charity. And I said, well, you have made no arrangements to do anything of the kind. And as these black garbage bags were going down the stairs with her belongings in them, I was pulling them back up the stairs, and we were like having a tug of war with these bags.
Hey, here's one.
The next day, George Carhart took Shelly's family to the local dump to retrieve the clothes she was wearing when she was killed. They never found the clothes, but they say they did discover more than 24 jewelry boxes from Tiffany and Cartier, all of them empty.
When we questioned George about where the contents were, he told us that she was hawking her jewelry.
That explanation struck Shelly's family as dubious at best, but some find it credible, particularly in light of questions relating to Shelly's past, including a drug conviction in 1979 and alleged ties to a savings and loan scandal in the 1980s. Shelly's past, however, does not explain the matter of her truck. When the family brought the truck back to Florida, they discovered what they believed to be bloodstains. A local detective was asked to test them.
I did a field test to tell whether or not it was human blood, and the field test was positive. From the angle where the blood was on the passenger seat, it appears that it came from a head wound.
Shelly's family took the truck back to the plains and turned it over to the authorities. Some routine blood tests were performed. However, the Fauquier County Sheriff's Office claimed they didn't have the budget to do DNA comparisons. Shelly's family has taken out newspaper ads, written letters, and made numerous phone calls to local and state officials, all for one purpose. They want a full-fledged investigation, an investigation they believe will prove Shelly was murdered.
I can only think that an argument came about between Shelly and George, or Shelly and Carter Wiley. I don't know which of the two. I think it wasn't a planned thing, but I think one of them struck her and killed her, or felt that they had killed her, or felt that they had maimed her in a very serious way. And I think the rest of the scenario that we've been told is simply that. A scenario.
Shelly!
John Strasburger, a horse expert and editor of the Chronicle of the Horse, feels it is highly unlikely Shelly's horse would have behaved as Erica Stumvall described.
The element of the story that raises questions in my mind are a horse stepping on its rider in an open field. It's hard to imagine a horse intentionally or accidentally stepping on someone in that situation. Not impossible, but very hard to imagine.
I've talked to medical men who say a man with a big fist could strike a girl weighing 104 pounds and just with the force of his hand sever that ventricle. So that once that had happened and she was unconscious or dead, what could they do? So you take the shoe off of the horse, ram it onto a 4x4, and then with all the force you have, plant a hoof print over the heart.
What happened to Shelly Malone? The Sheriff's Department in Fauquier County, Virginia, issued the following statement in response to our story. Quote, Ms. Malone's death has been investigated and reviewed by several agencies to include the Virginia State Police. All conclude the death is accidental, end quote. In addition, the Office of the Chief Medical Examiner in Washington, D.C. also ruled that the death was accidental. Join me next time for another fascinating edition of Unsolved Mysteries.